Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to part 2 of our part 3 video in talking about how to go out, locate bass offshore, set up on them, and catch giant bass this summer offshore, possibly even your personal best. So, today we're going to cover part 2. It's going to be how to set up after you've located them. So, without further ado, let's dive into today's video. Welcome back, everybody. I want to thank you all so much for coming back for part 2 of our offshore series, where I'm teaching you how to go out, locate big bass, set up on big bass, and catch big bass, possibly even your personal best. So in the first video, I want to start off recovering what we talked about. I showed you what to look for on a map utilizing your map cards or a free software that you can go to like navionics.com and use their chart viewer. I've also talked about how to use a paper map, which on part 3, we're going to cover how you go out and locate fish using an old map. But we also covered in how I like to idle those offshore points of interest, or POIs, is like I like to call them. And then after I idled them, I also showed you pictures of what fish look like on structures, what they look like on your side imaging. Okay, so I hope that helped everybody to get us to this point. And if you guys liked what I said in the first video and you like what you're hearing so far on this video, if you could just go down there and hit subscribe for me and turn on the little bell icon, so that way when I put out a new video about how to fish, what to fish, and just how-to videos to make you a better fisherman, you get notified. I thank you all so much for your support. So let's go ahead and dive into part 2 today. And part 2 today is going to talk mainly about, how we're going to set up once we've located those fish. Okay. Once we've located those fish and we've done our homework from our main console part where we're actually out there looking at the side imaging. So once we identified fish, okay, the best thing to do, just like I showed you in that first picture, okay, when you're idling and you actually see what you want to stop and you want to throw on, you want to put your boat into neutral. If you have a Humminbird unit that's touchscreen, you could just reach over there, touch exactly what you want to put that waypoint on, and hit mark waypoint, and you're done. If you have a Helix unit, you have to, put your boat neutral. You always want to put your boat neutral to stop your forward momentum as much as possible so you don't miss what you're idling in front of you. And then you want to take your little cursor and you want to scroll over there with the arrows, the big arrows on the Humminbird units. You want to scroll over to what you want to mark and then hit mark waypoint, and you're done. So let's say we've located our fish offshore. We go past them. We turn around now after we've marked a waypoint. And what I want to tell you all is I use this is because it's super useful to me. But and this is a whole nother video itself, but just real quick, this is going to help out. If you go into your settings menu and you turn on the casting rings for your unit, what that allows you to do is you can set a casting radius out. And what I like to do is I like to put the casting ring radius on my waypoints 100 feet out. So that way, as I'm, idling into a spot to fish, let's say I don't even want to idle it and I just want to fish a historic spot, I can look at my unit as I'm getting closer and it tells me, it's always going to tell you you're, 200 meters out, 300 meters out, right? But with that casting ring, it lets me know that is my limit of advance, is what I like to say. I don't want to get any closer than that ring. And it just helps me set up easier. Okay, so that quick tip. So now we've located our fish. We've spun around. Okay, now what I want to talk about is how you set up on your fish offshore. Okay, and typically if you are, let's go with the first part here. Okay, you are throwing up onto a ledge or a bunch of hard spots that you've located. Okay, I typically like to throw up shallow and crank out or drag out to that drop off. Okay. So I'm going to show you a picture, and I'm just going to basically make a little, like a little red dot. And then I'm going to put up, a little section like this where I would be casting. And I want you to envision that's that little box that I'm going to create for you, like a little cone. That's how I'd be setting up. So let's go ahead and insert the picture right here. Okay, in that picture, you can see I've got my boat facing into shallow water, and I'm casting up into shallow water, and I'm cranking back out, or I'm dragging back out. Okay. So with that being said, that little cone that I have, okay, that I drew for you all, that is like my left and right limit where I'm focusing on casting, but I'm casting in that direction. That's what that little cone I made for you all. That's what it looks like. The dot is the boat. The cone is like my left casting side, my right casting side. I'm focusing in that area. Okay. And I'm going to, crank or drag coming down first. All right. Sometimes, and we're going to cover this right now. Your boat position is the most important thing when you locate offshore fish. I get so many people all the time that says, Chad, I found fish. I set up on them and they wouldn't bite. Well, sometimes, man, it just has to do with they're not feeding, or somebody could have been there before you. But sometimes it has a lot to do with your boat position. Okay. Not all the time do bass want the crankbait. Do they want a jig? Do they want a Carolina rig coming down? Okay. Maybe they want it coming up. And what I like to touch on is you need to understand the way you're positioning your boat. It can be either deeper. So let's say those fish are set up in 25 foot of water and they want it coming off of the shallow water to the ledge. Well, then you have to position your boat in 30 plus foot of water, and you want to cast all the way up into about 22 foot of water, right? And then work your way back to that strike zone if they're sitting in 25 foot of water. You need to give yourself that buffer. Now, if they want the bait coming up the ledge or up to shallow water, well, then you just turn your boat around. You may be setting in 18 foot of water, casting out to 30, and you're going to work your way up that ledge. Okay. So your boat position is most of the time so critical. And if you've ever heard really good offshore fishermen, they'll tell you that boat position is super critical the way they want that bait coming. Okay. And your boat position can be determined by a lot of factors. It can be determined by whether you have wind current in the lake, like we talked about in the first video, or you actually have current in the lake where they're drawing water for power. If you live on power plant lakes, if you live at Kentucky Lake, or even here on Rayburn, most of these places draw water to create power for other places. That creates an underwater current, like a river system. Okay. And like we talked about in my last video, how these fish like to set up on the backside of ledges and things of that nature due to current, because you don't want to be just up there and like on this side. If your flat is here, okay, and the current's heading this way, okay, and it drops off on this side. So let's see if I can do this right way. So here's your flat. This is the drop off on this side. This is the front side drop off. If current's coming this way, bass are not going to set up on this side of this most of the time. There will be fish out there, but 90% of the time, if the current's flowing this way, those bass are going to set up over here on this side drop. This protects them from getting blown around. It's just like if you all go outside and it's super windy and it's really, it's blowing you around. Or even, okay, let's use this as a better example. When you all go out fishing and it's a super windy day, where do you guys go? You try to get out of the wind, right? You get behind points that are tucked in to protect you from the wind. You get into coves, into pockets, okay? And those bass do the same thing underwater. So the bass will set up on this side to keep the current that's going this way from blowing them out. And they have to work hard to constantly be in this position over here. But if they're over here where there's hardly no current, or there's a break in a current, also known as an eddy, that's where they'll set up, because their forage will blow along here. And when it comes over the top of this ledge, they come up there and ambush them. Okay. And I think that's really important to note. And I hope that really helps you all out with the boat positioning of like a ledge with current. Okay. And Another thing that will determine your boat positioning is like I said, we've already covered the wind and current, is conditions. Is it sunny? Is it cloudy? So if it's cloudy, you know that your bass are going to set up shallower. Okay. So those ditches and drains and stuff, a ditch is a drain. They just call them drains down here in Texas. But your ledges and things of that nature, if it's cloudy in your drains and ditches, they will set up shallower. There's no need for them to be 30 foot when it's a completely overcast day and it's cool or it's drizzling, right? Bass will set up shallower. Now, on a bright, sunny, hot day like we have in Texas here today, and we've had for several days, where you can cook an omelet out there on my car hood, bass will set up deeper. Bass do not have eyelids. That's why they have to either use depth or cover to get the sun out of their eyes. So think about it like that. When you jump in your car and you're driving down the way, you put sunglasses on, right? Well, bass they do not have those options. So they either have to get into cover or under something that creates a shadow, or use their depth to minimize the light penetration that you're getting down in the water. So if it's bright and sunny, those bass will set up deeper in order to protect their eyeballs. And plus, when it's so hot outside, cooler water is deeper. Okay. And that's a whole separate video itself. But so weather, conditions, that will all determine where your bass are setting up offshore. Brush piles. Okay. We talked about brush piles. Brush piles, they can get in and usually get some kind of cover where they'll get right underneath them, but they still will relate to depth. Meaning when it's really, really hot, those bass will get, instead of being in a 15-foot brush pile, they might be out in a 30-foot brush pile. And don't write your shallow ones off so much, because you do have shallow water fish and deep water fish. We've talked about that in our prior videos. But typically they're going to use that depth to get away from light penetration and heat. Okay. So conditions are going to change the way your boat sets up. Now, when you were setting up, like I showed you in the prior picture, if you're, cranking down the ledge, let's say, now in a drain, it's going to be the same type of thing. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and insert a picture of a drain right here, and I'm going to put the same dot for your boat position in red. And then I'm going to put like a little V to where you're focusing on casting. Okay. So I'm going to insert it right here for you all. Okay, so now that you saw that, I've got the boat set out a little deeper, and we're casting up into the nose, I like to call it, or the shallow part of the drain, and we're working our way back out of that drain. Okay? Now, drains are unique offshore fishing. During your winter months and early pre-spawn months, if you find a drain that attracts fish, in those months, typically it will attract them year round. Okay? A drain, or it's also known as a ditch, okay, or a ravine. If you think about your topo map, if you were on dry land walking, that would be a ravine. It goes down. Or a draw, it's drawing you into something. Okay. Basic map reading skills. And you all can go online and Google stuff, and there's a lot of things that help you read topo maps. And if you'd all like to see a video on that, I can do a video to where I teach you how to read a topo map on your Humminbird units. So you're casting up into the drain and working your way out deeper, because drains will tend to like this. Like a drain would be like this. So imagine a ditch right here like this, okay? And this is the incline that it has. So it's going to be shallow up here, and it's going to be working deeper out here. So you're setting your boat up in a position to where you're making sure you're coming down that drain. And in a drain, those bass could be set up completely different than they would on a ledge out deeper. They might be setting up, if you have 15 foot of water at the nose of your drain right here, okay, and it drops off to 25 foot real quick. Well, guess what? Those fish are going to be setting right up there by the nose of the drain, because it's a sheer drop off. It's a different change. You're going to find drains that are subtle and they slope off nice and easy. And then you're going to find drains that at the very first, let's say, 50 feet of it is pretty shallow. Then after 50 feet, it starts dropping off quickly. And that's where you do your map reconnaissance. And that's where you're looking for subtle differences. Okay. So that's how you would set up in a drain, is that picture right there that I showed you. Now, Same thing on a drain that is kind of like a ledge. Now, they might, on a cloudy day, they might not be in the center of the drain. They might not be up here at the tip of the drain. They might be on the drain sides. And I turn my pin away this way. So that way here, I'll give you a 3D view like this. So if this is the drain, right? Okay. They might be set up on the sides of this drain. Instead of going up shallow, they just might move up vertically to feed, because above this drain, there's going to be a flat typically. And a lot of times bass, if they're really deep, they won't go straight up into the drain. They'll just move vertically up, and they'll go out on top of this lip, and they'll feed on the bait fish, bluegill, whatever they have up there, whatever's attracting them. And then they'll slide right back down. Okay. That's what bass do. So we've covered the drains and the ditches and kind of the ledges, how you set up on stuff. Now, brush piles. Okay. To set up on a brush pile, you can really set up truthfully any way you want. And it's always 9 times out of 10 going to depend on which way the wind is blowing. So if you have that live scope, if you have that Mega 360, okay, you can, let's start off with, if you only have live and you want to be able to utilize your live target to get that cast to line up to where you want to get the brush pile every time. Because the more you're missing the brush pile by not utilizing your electronics, the more time you're wasting. Okay. So you're typically going to pull up, get it within 100 feet of it, 80 feet. And I will look down at my unit, look at my waypoint. And then after that, I'm going to set myself up with my live scope. Once I see it start coming in view, I stop, and it's like that 100 feet mark. Okay. And usually when I'm going to fish a brush pile, I'm not looking with my live scope to watch my bait fall, watch my bait go through there. I'm not that guy that sits there and video game fishes unless it's wintertime and I'm throwing an Alabama rig or a jerk bait. Yeah. And I also use my live scope to pre-fish a lot. Okay. And that's a different video over itself. So you utilize that live scope, you get lined up, you make that cast into it. Because at this point, you've already done all your homework from the back. You know there's bass in there. The live scope, yes, does let you see a little better into the brush pile and determine how big these fish are or how they're set up on it, whether they're set up in the middle deep or they're set up in the tops. And, you just want to line yourself up with the electronics. A 360. Let's say that the beauty in a 360 is, let's say I have to face my nose of my boat, okay, facing this way, but my brush pile's back over here, okay? Well, that 360, because it pings around all the time, and the live scope only has a 20-degree cone coming out of the front of it, I can still look at my graph, turn, and make a cast to that brush pile back here, okay? So that's where 360 really shines. Offshore is it helps you no matter way the wind's going or how you need to set up, you can hit that brush pile the way you need to. Now, brush piles, there is some subtle things that you want to take in consideration. If you've got a brush pile on a ledge, sometimes they don't want you casting shallow and pulling it off into deeper water. So when you fall off that last little bit of brush, it falls and just goes all the way to the bottom. And you're really not hitting your brush pile. So sometimes the best thing to do is set up shallow, cast out to the deep, and then, kind of pull your lure up and over the brush pile. And then when it falls, it's actually staying within the relative strike zone. The one caveat to that was, I will tell you, if you've got a brush pile here and you make a cast over into deep water and your bait's going to fall like this, and you're going to have all that line over the brush pile. So be cognizant of that. You will get hung up more casting out deeper to a brush pile and bringing it up shallower, okay? That's where those lure knockers come in if you got a lure knocker. If you're fishing a tournament, I'd highly recommend, if you get hung up, just break it off, because once you get too close to a pile, fish scatter and you spook them. If you're fishing for fun, go get it, because, look, I pay same amount of money as everybody else for tungsten weights and, $6.99 a pop for 2 of them. I'm not going to break it off in practice. I'm sorry. I'm going to go get it. Okay. So that's how you would set up on your brush pile. What I want to tell you all too is that when we're in those areas, okay, and you just heard me talk about staying back, you don't want to spook your fish. Okay. You want to stay back about 100 feet, 80 feet, whatever you're comfortable with at first. Don't get on top of these spots. Okay. And here's a free tip for summertime. In the wintertime, it doesn't happen really. In the summertime, if you hook a fish in a drain or a ditch or on a ledge or even in a brush pile, you will pull the whole school to you. Okay. So you need to be patient. If you pull a whole school to you, I've been cranking so many times, and I've got some baits I want to show you all after this. But this bait right here, is an Azuma, Z-Boss 24. But throwing these big plugs like that, I've hooked big bass, and I've literally watched on my electronics me pull the whole school up from where I was targeting them. They will follow the fish in with that crankbait in its mouth. I kid you not. I have seen fish come up and try to take the bait out of the bass's mouth. So if you pull the whole school up to you, be patient. They will go set back up. But don't waste a bunch of time if you're in a tournament. If you pull the whole school to you and you give it, like, let's say 4 or 5 minutes, and you don't see them going back, you might need to get back on your big graph and idle and find them because they might have relocated. Okay. Or you go to your next spot. If you can't get them to set back up, and you come back to that later, and they should be set back up relatively in the same area. They might have moved 50 yards, but they should be there. Okay. So what on as far as brush piles, a free tip for you all: when you're fishing brush piles in the summer, a lot of times you'll get 2 or 3 bites out of one, and then that's about it because they wise up pretty quick. So what I do is I leave, I go fish the other things I want to fish, and I come back to that brush pile because I know it was producing. Now, before I dive into the baits that you want to throw, everybody, I want you to understand, do not get discouraged going out and fishing offshore. I spend a lot of time idling behind my graph before I even fish. And if you're going out there to fun fish, I understand you want to go out there and catch fish. Okay. So maybe my advice would be spend a little bit of time locating these good offshore spots one day. Like if you have a day that it's just like right now really, really hot and you really don't want to be out there just fishing the whole time, idle around and locate good offshore structure, good offshore spots. This is going to allow you to come back the next day if you find fish there, and you can just pull up and start fishing instead of wasting a bunch of time idling around. Where everybody gets discouraged about offshore fishing is everybody likes to go down the bank and just cast because they can see the bank. You may not catch 100, fish. You might not catch any fish within 100 yards. And then you come to a small 25-foot section and you're just slaying them. It's the same thing offshore. When you're idling, you're actually getting to look for the fish. So think about it. You're saving time where you'd go down that bank. Well, if I idle down offshore, like let's say that bank's underwater and I'm idling and I don't see anything there, I'm not stopping. I'm not. I just saved my time fishing. People just get hung up. They just want to fish. They can't take it. And I've fished with people like that before. They just can't take it and they got to start throwing at something. If you want to be successful offshore, you're going to have to be patient. Okay. And not every group of fish is going to bite. Just understand that. So that's where the time comes in of using your electronics and locating fish. I promise you it works. Okay. And it takes some practice and a lot of pain. But when you get good at it, it is very successful because a lot of times of the year, yes, you have shallow fish. Yes, you have deep fish. But at least 80% of the time of the year, those fish are out deep. They're out deep during the summer. They're out deep during the winter. And the only time they really come up shallow is like, you get your shad spawn and stuff in the spring, and they're already kind of shallow anyways from like the bass spawning. And in the fall, they'll go up there and they'll push bait up. But typically, I still catch very big fish in the fall on gizzard shad with Alabama rigs that are like over 30 foot of water. So they stay deep a lot of the times. A lot of your better bass do. So don't get discouraged. Be patient and believe in yourself, because once you stop believing in yourself, it sucks. And yes, that's why I tell you, have fun with it. Spend one day just run around idling, dialing your electronics in, understanding why these bass are setting up. Use yourself to set your own self up for success for the next day. Okay. So now we're going to dive in a little bit, and we're going to end this video, and then we're going to cover part 3 of how to use a map to transition into fishing offshore. Baits that I love to throw offshore during the summer months and even the winter months. I don't stop cranking in the winter months. And since we're talking about winter, a big color for me is right now I've got this Z-Boss. This is a Z-Boss 24. It's in a short truce and like blue color. You can see it's very dull looking. Okay. And that's a whole separate video. And I've got videos that's on my YouTube page that talks about offshore fishing and wintertime fishing, about using dull colored baits in the wintertime because the fish are duller. But I'll throw this. Okay. Now I'll also drag, this here is the cross baits. These are the split tails. I turn it around so you can see kind of the, back. Here's the front of the packaging. This right here is cross baits. Guys, I love cross baits. Danny Cross is the owner, and he's an amazing guy. He works really, really hard. But I'm going to tell you all right now, I use a lot of cross bait stuff, not only because they're a sponsor of mine, but I was using them beforehand. And the reason why is because there's so much thought that goes into cross baits lure selection. Okay. As you can see, I'm going to pull one out. This is a split tail. It looks like a flute. You can't obviously call it a flute for purposes of somebody else having stuff. But you really can't see it on stream. I'm in my video. You can see it a little bit. See the bigger fleck in it? This is a good summertime color because this is Green Pumpkin Magic, but it's got bigger fleck in it. It puts off a lot more shine. In the wintertime, I use things with a lot smaller fleck, and Danny he's an angler too, and he thinks like that. So he's got baits that's got smaller fleck in it. Okay, and that's really important to me. If you don't think fleck size matters, it matters. But back to my point. This is Crossbait Split Tail. If you guys go to, crossbaits.com, and you can go to their Facebook page, and actually in this video right here, if you go to the About section on my page, you will see why I have a link to Crossbaits and all the wonderful things that I use to make myself successful, which they're tools. Okay. If you go to my main page on my channel, over there on the right-hand corner, there's not a symbol for crossbaits, but where you see the old 18 symbol and stuff, if you just scroll your mouse over the top of it, you will see it pop up and it'll say crossbaits. But you can find it in the About section on my YouTube page. You scroll down to links and you'll see everything that I've got tagged there. But if you use Chad10 at checkout, it will save you 10%. It'll help cover your shipping. Okay. So this is a split tail. This is what I like to throw on a Carolina rig. I also throw it inside of brush piles. So when I do that, I rig it on a Texas rig, and a lot of times I'm popping this bait. Another one that is a super useful tool is the 10.5-inch worm, or a ribbon tail worm. This one's in Green Pumpkin Magic also. This has been a big color for me right now, and it's been working well, and plum. I throw a big worm in the summer. And another thing I really like to throw is, this is called a Wormzilla. Okay. This is a 10.5-inch worm. It's just thicker. And a lot of people get intimidated by this, but I rig it on a shaky head. Okay. Where everybody's dragging Carolina rigs and things of that nature deep, and they're throwing jigs, I will come back with a shaky head. And what's unique about this cross baits one is, if I throw this in water right here, this thing is going to float. So when I rig it with a shaky head, the weight's down and the back of this thing rises up. Okay. And this is a giant worm. It is, but giant worms will catch big bass. We're also working on a new prototype, for a more of a trick style worm, a thinner finesse worm that we've been working on. And when that comes out, you guys will be the first to know. So color wise during the summer for crankbaits, real quick, but so we can, go ahead and cut this video off and get into part 3. This is a 6XD. This is an 8XD. This is a Strike King. And, this color right here, it's a great color to use offshore because of the white bass and crappie and things like that they eat during the summer months. And you'll have to forgive me, I'm drawing a blank on this color. Barfish. Got it. Barfish. This is the barfish color. I like to throw this. I like to throw the Z-Boss 24 in the, I think this one's called Citrus Shad. Okay. You can see it's a bright, loud color. And then just OG, you can throw them in 8XD, for Strike King or the Azumas. I'm not sponsored by either one. I just really like their crankbaits. And we all know Strike King's got, the basically, crankbait god status with Kevin Van Dam when they created the 8XDs and 6XDs and things like that. But this one is just sexy shad. Okay, this is in the Z-Boss 24 Azuma crankbait. And you can see it's just got the purple, or, a little bit of purples, a little bit of blues. Same thing for the 8XD, Citrus Shad. I love this citrus shag color. I don't have one on my deck right now, or not deck, but this table, because I lost one the other day and I got to go get another one. Another great color, chartreuse and blue. It's just a standard color. Guys, when I talk about grinding your crankbaits and beating them into the dirt, that's what you need to do during the summer. But I've got plenty of videos on my YouTube page describing how to crank. I also have plenty of things that say what rods to throw stuff on, how to set stuff up. And if you have a specific question, put it in the comment section, and I'd love to answer your question. So we're going to close out this video now. I gave you some examples of things I like to throw offshore: jigs, Carolina rigs, Texas rigs, drop shots. Okay. That's how you set up on bass. Once you get set up, that's how you set up on them. And if this video helped you all and you ended up catching a giant, come back. If you didn't do it, hit subscribe and hit like on this video. It truly goes a long ways. It helps me grow and is greatly appreciated, because a lot of work goes into these videos and a lot of time gets taken away from me to make the videos for you. So I hope everybody has a great day. We'll get part 3 out in a few days to y'all. As always, God bless you and God bless the United States of America. Until next time, everybody, Marler.